This is the Susannah block. It finishes at 12 inches. It's a 4x4 grid, so there are 4 units across and 4 units down. Here's the diagram. There are only 3 patches. Here's what 4 look like block to block in the same colorway. And this is your 4x4 grid. This is information down here if you want to make an 8-inch block. This block, the 12-inch block, that's a 4x4 grid, means that each grid unit finishes at 3 inches. If you want to make an 8-inch block, then each of these grid units will finish at 2 inches. Here are the patches. Patch A is a 3-inch finished square. We'll cut 3.5-inch squares. And here are the number of patches we need. If you have AccuQuilt, here are the dies you can use to cut this patch. Patch B is a 3-inch finished half square triangle. We cut 3 7/8 inch squares, cut them in half once diagonally, and we get 2 patches. For this one we need 4 patches. So that means you'll need to cut 2 squares and cut each one in half diagonally, and you'll get your 4 patches. And here are the AccuQuilt dies for this shape. For patch C is the 6-inch finished square on point. And there is no die that I know of that matches this, so I didn't put any here. But we will cut 1 square at 4 3/4 inches. What we're going to do is simply piece the square on point, and I'll have instructions for that later in this video. And then here is just a sample layout. This is 5 across and 7 down, so 35 blocks, and these are just multicolored blocks with the black fabric the same in each block. Now let's look at the fabrics I've chosen. Here are the squares. These are large squares, so this block goes together fast. I have a light, a medium, and a dark. And this is for the square on point, and these triangles are also for the square on point. Now I'm going to show you how to piece the square on point for both rotary cutting and AccuQuilt cutting. Piecing the square on point unit using rotary cutting patches. You have your 4 half square triangles that go on the corners and your large square in the center that's set on point. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first. And what I do is flip this over, center the square on the triangle, matching these edges, the long edge of the triangle and one side of the square. You want to see if these triangles over here on the right and here on the left are roughly the same size. You just kind of eyeball it. So there, I'm going to go with that. Stitch 1/4 inch from this edge, a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Do this side as well. Press your seams open, and if you look, these edges extend here, and what I'm going to do now is just trim these off straight in line with the side of the square. Put your half square triangle down with the right side facing up, and then place this in the center, and then check the size of your triangles overhanging here. And what you're going to do here, you will start stitching right here in this V section where this point meets. And this should be a 1/4 inch from here to the edge of this fabric. Start here, stitch a 1/4 inch all the way to this side, and you should come out here at the same part on this side. And do that on both sides. And here's what the stitching looks like. And now you're going to press your seams open. And here's the finished unit. Now just trim off these little nubs on the sides. And your unit's finished. Piecing the square on point using AccuQuilt. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first. And you're going to place the half square triangle piece on top. We need to center it. I just kind of eyeball it, and I'm looking at this little triangle of the bottom fabric poking out here. You can barely see it. It's a little triangle poking out here. And then on the other side, there's a little triangle poking out here. What you want to do is try to get them as close to the same size as possible. So I'm just kind of shifting it a little bit. And you're going to take it to your machine, and your 1/4 of an inch should be right here at this point. So you stitch from this point 1/4 of an inch all the way down, and you come off at this point. And it's more important that you have the 1/4 of an inch than if you're exactly on the point. And you'll do that for both sides, this side and then this opposite side. Press your seams open. Now we'll flip it over and do the other 2 sides. You take your triangle, and now you have sides that you can match. You see the triangle has the points cut off. These points are going to line up with what we just sewed. So if you look here, you see they line up with this edge, these 2 edges, here, here, and across the top. Now you'll stitch 1/4 of an inch from that point here all the way down to this other point, and do that to both sides. It's really difficult to see this stitching because I used white thread, but you can see it coming out here, this little tag here and over here. If these don't match perfectly, if it's like it's not long enough, don't stretch this triangle because you'll just make the unit wonky. Just center it as much as you can and stitch 1/4 of an inch. Now we'll just press it open and it will be finished. And there's your finished unit. At some point when you finish your square on point unit, you'll have to sew something else to it. And you want to keep these points nice and sharp. And sometimes you might be matching it to a seam line or a plain piece of fabric or maybe another point. And I'm going to show you how to keep these points nice. If you've pressed your seam open, you will see where these 3 fabrics intersect and form a point right here. That's your point on the back, and it's also your point on the front. So you can stitch with this part on top, and you'll be able to make sure that your point stays there. I take a pin and put it right there at the point, and then pick it up on this back side. And in this case, I'm going to come down about 1/4 of an inch and then put that right in the seam line. That way the point will end up right on the seam line. Put your fabric pieces together and line up the top edges or the edges that you need to line up. And make sure your pin is perpendicular, goes straight down into the fabric, like that. If you're at an angle like this, your points won't match. So make sure they're straight, perpendicular to the fabric, and then put it into the fabric. When you start sewing, line up these edges here. Start at your 1/4 of an inch and sew all the way down, and you're going to aim for this point where that pin goes into the fabric, and you'll know that you're matching the point and the seam line on the back. And straighten your bottom edge again and continue stitching 1/4 of an inch off. And here's what the stitching looks like if you can barely see it on here with this thread. It goes right across here, leaving the point open. You're not stitching over the point. And then if I flip it over, you'll see it's not exactly 1/4 of an inch there, but that doesn't matter because what you want is the point to match the seam allowance here. Now just press the seam open and you're finished. Once our square and square unit is finished, it goes right in the center, and then we just place the squares according to the diagram. I'll piece these 2 pieces together and attach them to the center, then piece the top row and the bottom row, and then piece those together. Thank you for